Current and former residents of an HOA, what's your "I'll never live in an HOA again" story? My old house's backyard bordered an HOA community. Our house was built 30 years before the community was built, so we weren't part of it. We used to get notices about violations and fines if we didn't correct them. Never did correct them. They finally sent legal papers to repossess our house. Went to court with a tax map that showed our property not part of the HOA community. Judge dismissed their suit against us and found them guilty of harassment. We didn't get awarded much, but I made sure to break every rule of theirs I could until we moved. I live in Florida and have the pleasure of living in an HOA neighborhood while not being a part of the HOA. Apparently there are a total of 3 houses in my neighborhood not part of the HOA, and I was fortunate enough to have bought one of them. Ever previous owner refused to sign into the HOA, and I have continued this tradition. Best part is getting all sorts of fines, letters, and people knocking on my door informing me of stupid trivial violation. I just get to laugh at them while I explain I'm not a member of their stupid little club and therefore not beholden to its rules. At one point they had my truck towed out of my driveway because of the HOA's no truck policy. I simply called the cops and reported it stolen. It was found at a local impound lot, and returned to me free of charge. The HOA ended up having to pay for the tow/impound fees, and tried on several occasions to pass those on to me through fines. Finally had a lawyer write up a cease and desist letter telling them to leave me alone or I'll press charges for the theft of my truck and harassment. That was 6 months ago, and I think they finally figured out they have no authority to tell me squat because I haven't heard from them since. I usually like living in HOAs, and the ones I've lived in have been decent, but my parents' HOA is insane. When my dad was diagnosed with cancer and began his chemo, he became too weak to walk. My parents installed a ramp at the front door so he could get his wheelchair into the house. Their neighbor, the HOA president, went crazy. She demanded doctor's notes, appointment slips, and that my dad prove to the neighborhood that he could walk and was lying. My dad was too weak to do anything and mom is too passive, so I had to step in. I threatened to lawyer up and sue her personally. She eventually backed down. My dad passed away in April, and a week after, she came banging at our door saying she saw the funeral home come and pick my dad up and that we need to take the ramp down now that he's finally dead. Her exact words. At that point, I called the police right in front of her to report her for stalking and harassment. I moved in with my mom, and now every time this woman sees me, she runs back into her house. On another note, she follows neighborhood kids home from school asking their names and where they live because she wants to know if they really live there and my neighbors, and I have caught her many times looking into our backyards. I love reading contracts and agreements, so when a friend of mine told me about his HOA troubles and not letting him keep his boat behind his house, I jumped on the opportunity. After reading, sourcing, and finding a few rulings I learned that they have very little power to enforce what they can't see from the road, which affects property value. He took my documentation to the HOA and requested that they remove his fines. They refused, saying the agreement says nag, and after a few months he finally paid a real estate lawyer $2,000 to go talk circles around the HOA, and they finally backed down, removed his fines and allowed him to keep his boat. Then, out of pure spite and with my design, we built a 40-foot tall temporary structure, conforming to both the HOA agreement and building code, to fly a flag on a further 25-foot pole. We took it down and put it back up every 3 months for a year. You could see it from almost anywhere in the neighborhood. It was a real triumph, and it was hideous. My grandparents lived in an old folks community with a zealous HOA. My grandmother had to go to the hospital, cause of her many health problems. My grandfather would go with her. This happened once when I was visiting. There was a knock on the door at about 10 a.m. Two elderly women with clipboards immediately jump into a speech about how the trash cans hadn't been brought in. I explained the situation. One of them said she was in the hospital the previous week but still managed to bring in her trash can, and handed me what looked like a ticket for $50. EFF that. I work in emergency services. I've had HOA board members try telling me we could idle our fire engine or park our ambulance there, as if I'd know the rules. I'm usually professional, but the second time they tried to complain about the fire engine idling, I responded along the lines of "Go EFF yourself. I don't care what your bylaws say." Article 300 of Michigan Traffic Code says I can park wherever the hell I want. We were there for a family with carbon monoxide poisoning, and I truly didn't give a damn about anything else at that moment. We had crews up and down the road to treat and transport the entire family. Reminds me of an incident that happened near me. The fire station was next to a train crossing. One day traffic was backed up by a slow morning train and the station had a call. One of the two cars blocking the station's driveway moved, but the other car stayed there. The firefighters asked them to move, but the people said they couldn't because they were waiting on the train blocking the road and didn't want to lose their place in line. Firefighters say EFF that noise and used the massive ladder truck to push the car out of its way. The car driver called the police and was cited for a long list of things. The driver was later sent a bill for damages to the fire truck's bumper. TLDR, don't block a fire truck because they will push your car out of the way. So, when I was a kid, my mom moved to a townhouse complex, which had a strata council, which was basically an HOA. I often keep late hours, so I like to keep my windows blacked out so I can sleep in. So, I tin-foiled my windows, which were recessed basement windows. You could not see these windows without being on our property. She got a notice to remove them, because no window coverings are allowed unless they are white or beige. She passes this along to me. So, I take the tinfoil down, put white paper over the windows, and then tinfoil behind that. And to further improve things, I then add a layer of black construction paper. No light is getting through, and it's all white from the outside, which is allowed. They then drop off a note asking what time they can come by to inspect to make sure there's no tin foil on the inside of the window. My mom and I had a good laugh over this, and ignored the letter. They sent a follow-up, more demanding, angrier letter. We ignored that too. Eventually they sent one threatening fines, and my mom sent one back that lied and said they had already inspected, and they needed to figure their shit out. And then she got an apology and no further hassling on this issue, because the Strata Council was full of busybodies who hated each other, and no one wanted to admit that they were out of the loop. Please like, comment, and subscribe.